Let's go back to the catechism. You know, one of the second or third questions is, why did the Lord make us? To know, love, and serve him, and to be happy with him in this world and the next. But where does it begin? It begins with knowing God. But God's a spirit. How can you know him? You can't even see him. Precisely. So how can he get through to you that he knows you, he loves you, he's acting in your life? All right. So we have a lot of animals. Well, not really. It's through the events. It's how events unfold. He can't appear to you because he doesn't have a body. Chickens, but chickens can get expensive to feed. So the way you come to know him is through his intervention in our life. So I'm going to eat them into small pieces because the chickens won't eat big pieces. They'll eat some love these. So then we'll walk on over. And what do you always find? When he reveals himself, you find he's a God of love and incredible mercy. And so if you say yes to him, because what did he give us? He gave us a free will. We could choose to love him. We could choose to reject him. We could choose to embrace his will for our life. We could choose to reject his will for our life. We have that choice. And so when we exercise our will, he absolutely respects it. What does that mean? Well, that means that if we reject God, he won't enter into our life. I have a brother who is very far away from the Lord, doesn't even believe in God. And one day I said, Lord, why? He's got a good heart. Why don't you work a miracle? Why don't you talk to him some night or give him some kind of an experience? And he said, I can't. I'm not allowed in his house. I said, what do you mean? He said, he's told me he wants no part of me. It's his free will, and I have to respect that. I can't counter it. So I can't go into his house or give him some kind of an experience to reveal myself to him. He's blocked me out. And so he's always a respecter of our will. So what do we have to do? We have to invite him in. And so that's what our lives are. Our lives, my husband and I, have been lives of continually inviting the Lord in, continually asking, show us the way. What do we do? But so many people don't believe that. God the Father is all love. Everything he does in our life is an action of love. Why? Because it's his nature. He is love. He is goodness. He is truth. And he can't violate his nature. So in his interactions with us, everything is love. Everything has a basis in love. That same brother I was telling you about had a tragic accident with a 3-year-old daughter. She burned up in a fire that was ignited by an engine on a boat. They were out on a lake and the engine caught fire. She was sitting right in front of the engine and she caught fire. Terrible. And what was my brother's reaction? Well, my brother's reaction was, how could a God of love have allowed something like this? Therefore, there must not be a God. No, 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 no. The question is, how could a God of love allowed something like this? There must be a reason, because that was an action of his love. But how? It seems so mysterious. It seems so tragic. But we know it's there because we know there's a God and we know he's a God of love. And so this is an action of love. And do you think tragedy can't be an action of love? What about his son on the cross? Was that not tragic? Here was this innocent man who the day before had healed some of the very people that were now calling for his crucifixion, giving his life completely innocent, shedding the last drop of his blood for the salvation of mankind. How could a God of love have allowed that? Because it redeemed all of humankind. It undid the sin of Adam. Now the gates of heaven were open. Now humankind could relate to the Father again. Now the Father could act in the life of humans because now we could invite him in. It was an action of love, but it required justice required a sacrifice. So I prayed. I said, Lord, how was this an action of love in the life of my brother? And the Lord answered my prayer 20 years later, but he answered it. And I saw that there was a flaw in my brother. My brother is a intervention radiologist. He's a brilliant man. He got into it when there were only 3 or 4 in the country. And I asked him once, have you ever lost a patient? And he said, not many, but a few. And I said, were they your fault? He said, no, they had very little chance to live anyway. He does the thing where he goes in using radiography and whatnot and goes into the brain and he pulls out blood clots from the brain to prevent hemorrhage and things. Okay, so he saves many, many lives. But when he was young, he was rash. And when he would get, like one time he almost burned our house down, he was given a kit and he was about 12 or 13 years old. And Mom said, be sure to read the instructions before you start. And he goes, oh, instructions, yeah, it's just for dummies, you know. So he just started. Well, he had an explosion and he nearly burned the house down. But, you know, fortunately, we were able to put the fire out. Why? Because he didn't bother to read the instructions. And so I said, what would have happened if it had been your fault? He said, if it had been my fault, I would have quit the practice. You would have quit the practice. Here you are, this brilliant man, this brilliant physician. You would have quit the practice. Well, what the Lord showed me is that flaw would have cost, that flaw of his brashness, not reading instructions, not paying attention to detail, would have cost him the lives of some of his patients. So instead, he allowed him to lose his daughter. You see, he had unhooked the safety mechanism that would have prevented the engine from catching fire. That's what he'd done. He wanted to go boating. They had friends over. The engine wouldn't start. So he unhooked the safety mechanism. The engine wouldn't start because there was a malfunction that could possibly result in a fire. And he unhooked it so that he could take the boat out. Well, there was a fire. It did catch fire. I prayed for my brother. I wanted to know, how was it a loving act? And the Lord showed me. It was a very loving thing to do. He needed to learn a lesson. And he needed to learn the lesson so well that when it came time for his career to do what God created him to do, he had learned the lesson so that not one person would suffer. Because had one person died due to his negligence, he would have quit. And then all the hundreds whose lives he could save would never have been accomplished. So the Lord let him experience it in such a personal way that he learned his lesson. And he was very attentive. And he was able to save multiple lives. Oh, that's love, isn't it, at work? For more than just him. And he's lived a really good life. I mean, he gets paid beaucoup bunches of money. And he should. I mean, he's a specialist in a very specific area that needs, you know, a very specific skill and quality, and he's got it. And he's a good man. But the death of his daughter broke his heart. And I think his negligence was a little more than he could face. And so what did he do? Did what all of us do. We blame it on God. How could you have allowed this to happen? Well, my love allowed it to happen for a very specific reason. I believe that that's how Christ works. I believe that what that catechism question means, to know, love, and serve God, it means it on a very individual level. He wants each one of us to know him. And if you invite him in, he will reveal himself to you so that you can know God. And when you know him, you will love him because he will reveal his love to you. He will reveal his goodness to you. He will reveal his truth to you. And then you can serve him. And the serving will be simple because do we not always desire to serve those who we love? I mean, that's what marriage is about, really, ultimately. To know, to love, to serve. Pretty neat, huh? How the Lord has made it possible.